When my entitled daughter-in-law saw me at my granddaughter's wedding, she screamed, "This old shrew wasn't on the guest list. You let anyone walk in here? Get the owner now." I stayed silent. The manager turned to me. "Mrs. Anderson, shall I cancel their event at your country club?" Their jaws dropped. "If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me paint you the picture of how we got to this delicious moment. My name is Margaret Anderson. I'm 68 years old, and I've been dealing with Jennifer's entitled attitude for the past 7 years since she convinced my son Robert to cut me out of their lives. But this particular Saturday in October was different. This was the day she finally went too far. The wedding was at Willowbrook Country Club, the most exclusive venue in our county. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and a reputation that took generations to build. My granddaughter Emma had dreamed of having her wedding there since she was 12. When she got engaged 6 months ago, she'd secretly called me, tears in her voice, saying she'd never be able to afford her dream venue. What Jennifer didn't know was that Emma and I had been maintaining a close relationship for the past 7 years. What Jennifer also didn't know was that when Emma told me months ago about wanting to get married at Willowbrook someday, I'd quietly started making arrangements to ensure my granddaughter could have her dream venue. When Emma called me last week to invite me to the wedding, I was already prepared to make sure everything would be perfect. I'd arrived fashionably on time, wearing my best navy dress and the pearl earrings Emma had given me for my birthday. Emma looked radiant in her grandmother's restored lace gown, the one I'd worn 35 years ago and had secretly preserved for this day. The ceremony had been beautiful, and now guests were mingling in the grand ballroom, champagne glasses clinking, laughter filling the air. That's when Jennifer spotted me. She'd been holding court near the head table, regaling some poor souls with stories about how she'd personally convinced the club management to accommodate their special requests. Her voice carried that particular tone she used when she wanted everyone to know how important she was. Then her eyes landed on me, and her expression changed completely. The practiced smile vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. She excused herself from her audience and marched across the room with the determination of a woman on a mission. "Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." I took a sip of my champagne, savoring both the excellent vintage and the moment. "Hello, Jennifer. Beautiful wedding, isn't it?" Her smile tightened. "Yes, well, Robert and I worked very hard to make sure everything was perfect. This venue doesn't accept just anyone, you know." The condescension in her voice was nothing new. For 7 years, during our brief encounters at family events, Emma secretly arranged she'd been making little comments, subtle digs designed to remind me that she considered herself superior. Usually, I let them slide. Today felt different. "I'm sure you did work very hard," I agreed mildly. Something in my tone must have irritated her because her mask slipped further. "Actually, Margaret, I need to ask you something. How exactly did you get in here? I have the final guest list, and I don't recall adding your name." Several nearby guests had started to notice our conversation. I could feel their attention shifting toward us, that particular energy that signals drama brewing. "Emma invited me," I said simply. "Emma?" Jennifer's voice went up an octave. "Emma doesn't manage the guest list. I handled all the invitations personally, every single one." That's when I realized what was happening. Jennifer hadn't just forgotten to invite me, she'd deliberately excluded me from my own granddaughter's wedding, probably never even thinking to ask Emma if she wanted her grandmother there. The hurt hit me first, sharp and unexpected, but it was quickly followed by something else entirely. A cold, clear anticipation that I hadn't felt in 2 years. What happened next was 7 years of accumulated slights and insults finally reaching their breaking point. "I think there's been some mistake," I said, my voice still calm despite the anticipation building inside me. "Perhaps you should check with Emma." Jennifer's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, please, Emma was far too busy with dress fittings and flower arrangements to worry about every tiny detail. I handled the guest list myself, and I can assure you that I know exactly who belongs here and who doesn't." The conversation was definitely drawing attention now. I could see Robert across the room, deep in conversation with the photographer, completely oblivious to the scene his wife was creating. Emma was somewhere on the dance floor with her new husband, lost in newlywed bliss. Tiny detail, I repeated quietly. Is that what I am to you, Jennifer? For just a moment, her facade cracked completely. Look, Margaret, I know this might hurt your feelings, but this is a sophisticated venue with a certain caliber of guests. We needed to be selective. The implication hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. According to Jennifer, I wasn't sophisticated enough for my granddaughter's wedding. I wasn't the right caliber of guest. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, and I helped myself to a fresh glass. I needed a moment to think, to savor this moment before I revealed what I knew was coming. The old Margaret would have quietly excused herself, perhaps made some excuse about not feeling well. She would have called a taxi and slipped out the back door, nursing her wounded pride in private. But the woman standing here tonight wasn't the same person who'd been quietly taking Jennifer's abuse for 7 years. This woman had been planning for this moment ever since she'd won $53 million in the state lottery 2 years ago. You know what, Jennifer? I said, setting down my glass with deliberate precision. You're absolutely right. This is a sophisticated venue, and they do maintain certain standards. She looked surprised by my agreement, then pleased. I'm glad you understand. I'm sure Emma will want to take you to lunch next week to celebrate privately. Oh, I understand perfectly, I continued. In fact, I think I should probably speak to someone in management about this situation. Make sure everyone knows exactly where they stand. Jennifer's smile grew wider. What a wonderful idea. I'm sure they'll be very professional about helping you find the exit. That's when she made the mistake that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Instead of letting me walk away quietly, instead of accepting that I was graciously admitting defeat, she decided to twist the knife. You know, Margaret, she said, loud enough for the growing circle of eavesdroppers to hear, I think this might be for the best. These kinds of events can be overwhelming for people your age. All the noise, the crowds, the late hours. Really, you'd probably be more comfortable at home with your little television programs and your coupon clipping. The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. She wasn't just dismissing me. She was painting me as a doddering old woman who couldn't handle adult social situations and lived on Social Security. And besides, she continued, apparently not content with mere condescension, I'm sure you have better things to do with your limited resources than trying to keep up with events that are frankly above your means. That last comment revealed something crucial. Jennifer thought I was some pathetic widow scraping by on a pension, desperately trying to crash upscale events I couldn't afford. She had no idea what my actual financial situation was because she'd never bothered to ask. She'd never bothered to learn anything real about me at all. You're absolutely right, I said, my voice growing stronger. I should definitely speak to management. In fact, I think I'll ask for the owner personally. Jennifer's eyes lit up with malicious glee. Perfect. I'm sure they'll sort this out quickly. I'll even help you find them. She turned to wave over one of the formally dressed staff members, a young man who was clearly trying to pretend he hadn't been listening to our entire conversation. Excuse me, Jennifer called imperiously. We need to speak to whoever's in charge here. There's been a gate-crashing situation that needs immediate attention. The staff member whose name tag read Marcus approached reluctantly, his professional smile not quite hiding his discomfort with the situation. Jennifer, however, was practically glowing with anticipation. She'd positioned herself slightly behind me, as if ready to watch me be escorted out in disgrace. Of course, ma'am, Marcus said diplomatically. If you'd like to speak with management, I can certainly arrange that. Perhaps we could step into the office where it's more private. Oh no, Jennifer interrupted smoothly. I think it's better if we handle this right here. Transparency, you know. Everyone should see how professionally your establishment deals with uninvited guests. The word uninvited dripped with such venom that several guests actually stepped back. I could see faces in the crowd, people I'd known for years, friends from the garden club, neighbors, family friends. They were watching this public humiliation with a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. Robert was still nowhere to be seen, probably discussing golf with Emma's new father-in-law. My granddaughter was spinning on the dance floor, completely unaware that her grandmother was being treated like a common trespasser at her own wedding. Mrs. Anderson, Marcus said carefully, and I noticed Jennifer's sharp intake of breath at the use of my name. He clearly recognized me as the owner, but was maintaining professional discretion. Would you prefer I call Mr. Phillips directly, or would you like to wait for him to make his regular rounds? Mr. Phillips? Jennifer's voice had gone up an octave. Who is Mr. Phillips? The club manager, Marcus explained, though he was looking at me with an expression that seemed almost knowing. He should be here shortly. He always checks on major events personally. Perfect, Jennifer declared. Mr. Phillips can sort this whole thing out. I'm sure he'll be very interested to know that uninvited guests are somehow getting past your security. What she didn't notice, but I certainly did, was the way Marcus's jaw tightened at her tone, the way his professional smile became slightly more forced. Jennifer was making assumptions about her importance that were about to prove problematic. In the meantime, she continued, perhaps this person could wait somewhere less visible? We have photographers documenting the evening. And I'm sure you understand that we can't have inappropriate individuals in the background of the official photos. Inappropriate individuals. The phrase hung in the air like a challenge. I'd been holding my tongue, letting Jennifer dig her hole deeper and deeper, but that phrase pushed me past my limit. Not because it hurt, but because it was time to begin revealing just how spectacularly wrong she was about everything. Jennifer, I said quietly, are you quite sure you want to continue this conversation in public? Something in my tone made her pause. For just a moment I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. But her pride and her audience wouldn't let her back down. I'm simply trying to protect the dignity of this event, she said, raising her chin. Emma deserves to have her special day respected. Emma deserves better than this, I agreed. She deserves better than having her grandmother publicly humiliated at her own wedding. Her grandmother was invited, Jennifer shot back. You, however, were not. That's when I saw him. Robert, finally breaking away from his conversation, heading in our direction with a confused expression. He'd clearly noticed the crowd gathering and was coming to investigate. This was going to be interesting. Was my own son going to support his wife's cruelty? Or was he going to remember that I was his mother? Mom? Robert called out as he approached. What's going on here? Jennifer immediately turned to him, her expression shifting to wounded innocence. Oh, Robert, thank goodness. Your mother is here, and she seems confused about the guest arrangements. I've been trying to explain gently that there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I watched my son's face carefully, looking for any sign of what he truly knew. Had Jennifer really convinced him to exclude his own mother from the wedding? Or had she acted on her own? Mom, Robert said slowly. We haven't really talked in 7 years, I finished for him. Not since Jennifer decided our family would be better off without me in it. Robert's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, guilt, and then something that looked suspiciously like relief mixed with apprehension. Jennifer, he said carefully, didn't we discuss inviting Mom? Jennifer's confidence wavered slightly. We talked about it, but you said yourself that she probably wouldn't want to come, that it might be awkward given our history. What I said, Robert replied, his voice getting firmer, was that I hoped she would want to come despite our problems. I never said not to invite her. Before Jennifer could respond, Marcus cleared his throat respectfully. Excuse me, but Mr. Phillips is here now if you'd still like to speak with him. I turned to see a distinguished man in his 50s approaching our group. He wore the confident bearing of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations and demanding clients. Jennifer straightened immediately, preparing to present her case to the authority figure who would surely vindicate her position. Mr. Phillips, she said with renewed confidence, thank you for coming. We have a situation here that requires your immediate attention. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for since I'd written the check to purchase Willowbrook Country Club 13 months ago. Mr. Phillips approached with the measured pace of a man who dealt with 1,000 similar situations. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccably tailored, and his expression professionally neutral. This was clearly someone who knew how to handle difficult guests without breaking a sweat. Good evening, he said smoothly. I understand there's some concern about the guest arrangements? Jennifer stepped forward immediately, assuming the role of wronged party. Yes, there absolutely is. This woman, she gestured toward me, claims she has a right to be here, but she's definitely not on our authorized guest list. I personally managed every invitation, and I can guarantee you she wasn't included. Mr. Phillips nodded thoughtfully, then turned his attention to me. And you are? Margaret Anderson. I replied simply. I watched his face carefully as I said my name. What I saw was exactly what I'd expected, a brief tightening around his eyes, followed by something that might have been suppressed amusement. I see, he said carefully. And Mrs. Anderson, you believe you should be on the guest list for this event? I believe, I said clearly, that I have every right to be here tonight. Jennifer made an exasperated sound. Right? What right could she possibly have? This is a private event at an exclusive venue. You can't just walk in because you feel like attending a party. That's quite true, Mr. Phillips agreed. Willowbrook does maintain very strict policies about event attendance. Jennifer practically preened at his validation. Exactly. I'm sure you can see how awkward this is for everyone involved. Perhaps if security could escort her out discreetly? Robert was looking increasingly uncomfortable, glancing between his wife and his mother with growing distress. Jennifer, maybe we should discuss this privately before involving security. There's nothing to discuss, Jennifer snapped. She doesn't belong here, and I won't have Emma's perfect wedding ruined by some uninvited drama. That's when Mr. Phillips surprised everyone by asking the question I'd been hoping for. Actually, he said thoughtfully, before we make any decisions about Mrs. Anderson's status, perhaps I should clarify something. Mrs. Anderson, when you say you have a right to be here, are you referring to a specific invitation? Or something else? The question was asked with such careful precision that I knew he understood exactly what was happening, but he was giving me the opportunity to reveal the truth on my own terms. Something else, I confirmed. Jennifer rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please. What could possibly give her more right to be here than the actual paying customers? The crowd around us had grown larger, and I could see Emma's new husband whispering in her ear, pointing in our direction. My granddaughter's face went from confusion to concern as she realized her grandmother was at the center of some kind of commotion. Jennifer, I said quietly, are you absolutely certain you want to continue this line of questioning? For the first time since this confrontation began, I saw genuine uncertainty flicker across her face, but she was too far in now, too committed to her performance. I want this sorted out immediately, she declared. Mr. Phillips, I insist that you remove this person from the premises right now. Mr. Phillips looked around at the growing crowd, then back at Jennifer. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern for the event's integrity. However, before I take any action, I need to ask you directly, are you the party responsible for this evening's charges? Of course I am, Jennifer said proudly. My husband and I personally guaranteed payment for this entire event. Every detail, every expense, every accommodation. I see. And you're confident in your authority to determine who may or may not attend? Absolutely. This is our event, at our expense, with our guest list. Mr. Phillips nodded slowly, then turned to me with what I was now certain was barely contained amusement. Mrs. Anderson, would you like to clarify your relationship to this venue? This was it. The moment I'd been building toward for the past 20 minutes. The moment when Jennifer's arrogance and cruelty would finally catch up with her. Certainly, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom. I own it. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the jazz quartet still playing softly in the corner, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding 20 feet away. Jennifer's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, and then a growing horror as the implications began to sink in. You, what? She whispered. I own Willowbrook Country Club, I repeated, louder this time. I bought it last year after I won the lottery. Robert's face had gone completely white. Mom, what are you talking about? 2 years ago, I won $53 million in the state lottery. I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to see who would love me for myself, not my money. When the previous owner had a heart attack and needed to sell quickly, I saw an opportunity to make a smart investment. I gestured around the beautiful ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Every detail you've been admiring tonight, Jennifer, I own it. Every sophisticated element you've been bragging about, I paid for it. Jennifer was staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. That's impossible. You live in that little house on Maple Street. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You shop with coupons. I live modestly because I choose to, I replied calmly. Amazing how differently people treat you when they think you're just a poor widow, isn't it? The transformation on Jennifer's face was extraordinary to watch. The smug confidence melted away like ice cream in August, replaced by a dawning realization of just how catastrophically she'd miscalculated. "You're lying," she said weakly. "This is some kind of joke." Mr. Phillips pulled out his phone with practiced efficiency. "Would you like me to show her the ownership documents, Mrs. Anderson? Or perhaps the account information showing tonight's charges?" "The account information will be sufficient," I said graciously. He tapped his screen a few times, then held it out toward Jennifer. "As you can see, tonight's event is being billed to Anderson Holdings, LLC. Mrs. Anderson's company has been our primary account holder since the acquisition." Jennifer stared at the screen like it was written in hieroglyphics. But Robert arranged everything. The booking, the payments, the menu selections." "Actually," Robert said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "when I called to make the reservation, they told me the event was already pre-approved and they were waiting for the final head count. That's because I authorized it," I explained patiently. "When Emma called me crying about her dream wedding, I made sure everything would be perfect for her special day." "You authorized it," Jennifer repeated mechanically. "I also waived the standard facility fee, upgraded the catering package, and personally selected the vintage champagne you've been enjoying all evening." Each word landed like a physical blow. Jennifer's mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound emerged. Robert looked stricken. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "I wanted Emma to believe that her parents had made this magical day happen," I replied. "I thought it would mean more to her if she believed you had moved heaven and earth to give her the perfect wedding." The crowd was growing restless, sensing that the climax of this drama was still coming. Emma and her new husband had made their way closer. Emma's face, a mask of growing horror as she began to understand what her mother had done. "Grandma?" Emma's voice was small and frightened. "What's happening?" Before I could answer, Jennifer seemed to find her voice again. "This is ridiculous. Even if you do own this place, that doesn't give you the right to crash our private event." The audacity was breathtaking, even faced with undeniable proof. She was doubling down. "Our private event," I repeated thoughtfully. "Jennifer, would you like to know how much tonight is costing?" "I already know how much it's costing," she snapped. "We're paying for it. Actually, you're not. Your portion covers the basic rental fee for the ballroom. I'm covering everything else, the upgraded catering, the premium bar service, the enhanced floral arrangements, the additional staff, the extended hours. Your contribution covers about 18% of tonight's actual costs." Robert's face went from white to green. "How much are we talking about, Mom?" "The total bill for tonight will be approximately $47,000. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. "Your portion," I continued calmly, "is $8,500. I'm covering the remaining $38,500 as a gift to Emma." Jennifer was shaking her head frantically. No, that's not right. We budgeted $15,000 for the venue. The manager told us that covered everything." "Mr. Phillips told you that $8,500 covered the basic rental," I corrected. "I believe there may have been some miscommunication about what everything included." Mr. Phillips stepped forward diplomatically. When Mr. Anderson called to book the event, I explained that Mrs. Anderson had already approved enhanced services for her granddaughter's wedding. The pricing he was quoted reflected only the portion not covered by Mrs. Anderson's account. "But we thought," Robert started, then stopped, the full picture finally becoming clear. "You thought you were the big shots who'd secured the impossible booking through your own influence and wealth," I said gently. "And I let you think that, because I wanted Emma to be proud of what her parents had accomplished." Emma was crying now, though whether from embarrassment or gratitude, I couldn't tell. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they hadn't invited you properly. You have nothing to apologize for. Sweetheart, this is your special day, and nothing that's happened here changes how beautiful you look or how much we all love you." But Jennifer wasn't finished. Even cornered, even humiliated, she wasn't ready to surrender. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp with desperation. "So you own the place. That doesn't change the fact that you weren't invited. This is still our family event, and we still have the right to decide who attends." The legal implications of what she was suggesting sent a murmur through the crowd. She was essentially arguing that paying for an event at a venue gave her the right to exclude the venue's owner. Mr. Phillips looked positively alarmed. "Ma'am, I'm not sure that's exactly how venue rental agreements work. Actually, I said thoughtfully, she raises an interesting point. Jennifer believes that paying for an event gives her absolute authority over the guest list, even if it means excluding family members. I looked around at the crowd, making sure everyone was listening carefully. So let me ask you this, Jennifer. If paying for an event gives someone the right to control the guest list, and I'm paying for 82% of tonight's costs, what exactly do you think that means for your authority? The mathematical reality of the situation hit Jennifer like a freight train. If payment determined authority, then her $8,000 contribution gave her exactly 18% control over tonight's decisions. And 18% wasn't nearly enough to exclude the person covering the other 82%. You can't, she stammered, finally understanding that she'd been arguing from a position that completely undermined her own authority. Can't what? I asked mildly. Can't attend an event I'm paying for at a venue I own? I'm curious about the logic there. Robert stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. Mom, I think there's been a massive misunderstanding. Jennifer, why don't we— No, Jennifer cut him off, her voice rising to a pitch that was definitely going to be audible on someone's wedding video. I don't care who owns what or who paid for what. She wasn't invited, and that should be the end of it. The irony was becoming almost painful to watch. Jennifer had started this confrontation by publicly humiliating me about not belonging at a sophisticated venue. Now she was essentially arguing that ownership and payment were irrelevant to attendance rights. You know what? I said, pulling out my phone. You've raised such an interesting legal question that I think we should get an expert opinion. I scrolled through my contacts and tapped on a familiar name. Harold? Yes, it's Margaret. I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday evening, but I have a fascinating contract law question for you. Harold Peterson had been my attorney for 20 years and was probably enjoying a quiet dinner with his wife. But as one of the state's most respected contract lawyers, he'd find this situation academically interesting. I'm at a venue I own for an event I'm 82% funding. I continued loudly enough for everyone to hear. One of the other parties is arguing that their 18% contribution gives them the right to exclude me from attendance. Could you clarify the legal standing of that position? I could hear Harold's laughter through the phone. Margaret, please tell me you're not in the middle of some kind of contract dispute at a social event. Actually, I'm at Emma's wedding, and it's becoming quite educational. Put me on speaker, Harold said immediately. This I have to hear. I obliged, and Harold's voice rang out clearly in the increasingly silent ballroom. Good evening, everyone. I'm Harold Peterson, Mrs. Anderson's legal counsel. Would someone like to explain this situation to me? Jennifer looked like she was about to faint, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Mr. Peterson, I'm Jennifer Anderson. My husband and I paid for this event, and we have the right to control the guest list. This woman, she gestured at me with visible disdain, was not invited. I see, Harold said thoughtfully. And Mrs. Anderson, what's your position? I own the venue, and I'm covering 82% of the event costs. Jennifer is arguing that her 18% contribution gives her authority to exclude me. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear Harold typing on his keyboard. Mrs. Anderson, he said finally, in my professional opinion, Mrs. Jennifer Anderson's position is not only legally baseless, but potentially actionable. If she attempts to exclude you from an event you're funding at a venue you own, she could potentially be liable for harassment, trespassing on commercial property, and interference with business operations. Jennifer's face had gone from red to white to an alarming shade of green. However, Harold continued, I would recommend resolving this matter diplomatically rather than pursuing legal remedies. Family gatherings rarely benefit from litigation. Thank you, Harold, I said sweetly. That clarifies things beautifully. I ended the call and looked around at the assembled crowd. Emma was still crying, though now she looked more relieved than distressed. Robert appeared to be seriously reconsidering some of his life choices, and Jennifer looked like she was calculating the fastest route to the nearest exit. So, I said conversationally, now that we've established the legal framework, perhaps we can move forward with the evening. But I wasn't quite finished with Jennifer yet. 7 years of being treated like an unwanted burden had built up a substantial debt of justice, and tonight seemed like an excellent time to collect. Jennifer, I said, my voice carrying the authority of someone who'd just been confirmed as holding all the cards. Before we continue with the festivities, I think we should address a few things. She looked at me with the expression of someone who just realized they were trapped in a room with no exits. First, I'd like you to apologize to Emma for creating this scene at her wedding. Grandma, you don't have to, Emma started. Yes, I do, I said firmly. Your mother chose to turn your reception into a public spectacle rather than handle a simple misunderstanding with grace. That was selfish and cruel. Jennifer's mouth opened, but no words came out. Second, I continued, you owe every guest here an apology for subjecting them to this embarrassing display instead of simply asking quiet questions about perceived problems. The crowd was watching this unfold with the fascination of people witnessing something they'd never see again. And third, I said, my voice growing softer but more dangerous, you owe me an apology for 7 years of treating me like an inconvenient burden instead of recognizing that I'm the woman who's been quietly supporting your family in more ways than you ever bothered to discover. That's when Jennifer finally found her voice again. And what came out revealed exactly who she really was underneath all the pretense and performance. I don't owe you anything, she hissed. Rich or poor, you're still a meddling old woman who can't accept that your son has a new family now. The gasp from the crowd was audible, even by Jennifer's standards. This was shockingly cruel. But for me, it was perfect, because it finally showed everyone exactly who they were dealing with, and it gave me the justification I needed for what I was about to reveal next. Jennifer's words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Rich or poor, you're still a meddling old woman who can't accept that your son has a new family now. The collective intake of breath from our audience was audible, but what followed was something I hadn't expected. Scattered applause. Not sarcastic clapping, but genuine appreciation from guests who'd apparently been waiting years for someone to finally call Jennifer out on her behavior. Well, I said calmly, that certainly clarifies your position. And you know what, Jennifer? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am a meddling old woman. I've been meddling in your life for the past 2 years, and you never even noticed. Her expression shifted from defiant to confused. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $42,000 I've quietly transferred to your joint account since I won the lottery. Every time Robert mentioned you were temporarily tight on money, every time he worried about making ends meet, I meddled by making deposits through my investment firm so my son wouldn't stress about finances. Robert's face went completely pale. Mom, what deposits? The ones your bank statements show as portfolio returns and dividend payments. Jennifer, didn't you ever wonder why your investments were performing so remarkably well during economic uncertainty? I could practically see the wheels turning in Jennifer's head as she tried to calculate how much of their comfortable lifestyle had been secretly subsidized by the woman she'd just publicly insulted. I also meddled by paying off Emma's student loans when you two were struggling with that house payment. You know, the house that was $30,000 over your budget? The one Jennifer convinced you was an investment in our future? Emma gasped. Grandma, you paid off my loans? Every penny. Sweetheart, after I won the lottery, I set up an anonymous loan forgiveness program that mysteriously selected you. Your parents thought you'd been chosen for some merit-based program. I may have encouraged that misconception. Jennifer was now looking around the crowd with growing panic, finally understanding that this wasn't just about tonight's wedding. This was about 2 years of secrets coming to light in the most public way possible. And I meddled by co-signing Robert's business expansion loan when the bank wanted additional collateral. You know, the expansion that doubled his income and allowed you to quit your job to focus on personal enrichment activities. The personal enrichment comment hit its mark. Jennifer's idea of enrichment involved yoga retreats and wine-tasting courses while Robert worked 60-hour weeks. But my most significant meddling, I continued, savoring every word, was paying for your country club membership when your application was initially declined. If Jennifer's face got any whiter, she was going to need medical attention. Declined? Robert whispered. Oh yes, the membership committee had some concerns about Jennifer's references. Apparently several people had shared stories about her behavior at social events, but I wrote a personal recommendation and covered the initiation fees. All because I wanted my son's wife to feel accepted in the community. The crowd was now openly staring at Jennifer, and several club members looked like they were remembering specific incidents that had contributed to those concerns. "You're lying," Jennifer said weakly, but her heart wasn't in it anymore. "Mr. Phillips," I called out, "would you mind confirming when the Anderson family membership fees were last paid?" He consulted his phone again. "The account shows payments through 2026, prepaid by Anderson Holdings, LLC in January. So even your precious country club membership, the one you've been bragging about all evening, was paid for by the meddling old woman you just insulted in front of everyone." That's when Jennifer made her biggest mistake of the evening. Instead of apologizing, instead of recognizing that she was completely outmatched, she decided to go nuclear. "Fine!" she screamed, loud enough to stop the band mid-song. "You want to play games with money? Let's see how you feel when Robert chooses between his manipulative mother and his wife." She grabbed Robert's arm and started pulling him toward the exit. "We're leaving. Right now. And if you ever want to see your grandchildren again, you'll stop this public humiliation immediately." Robert resisted her pull, looking back and forth between his wife and his mother with obvious anguish. "Jennifer, please, let's just calm down and—" "No!" she shrieked. "I'm done being manipulated by this woman. Choose, Robert, right now, your wife and children or her." The ultimatum hung in the air like a loaded gun. Jennifer had just demanded that my son choose between his family and his mother at his daughter's wedding, in front of 100 witnesses. But what she didn't know was that ultimatums only work when you actually hold the power position. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen by the drama unfolding before them. Emma was crying openly now, her perfect wedding day turning into a nightmare of family destruction. Robert stood paralyzed between his wife and his mother, his face a mask of anguish. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Well, Robert?" Jennifer demanded, her voice shrill with hysteria. "Are you going to let your mother continue manipulating our family, or are you going to stand by your wife?" Before Robert could answer, I stepped forward. "Actually, Jennifer, since you're so fond of ultimatums, let me give you one of my own." Her eyes widened, but she was too far gone to back down now. "You have two choices," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "You can apologize to everyone here for the scene you've created, thank me graciously for supporting your family all these years, and we can finish Emma's wedding like civilized people." I paused, letting the first option sink in. "Or you can continue this tantrum, and I can show everyone exactly what happens when you bite the hand that's been feeding you for 2 years." "What's that supposed to mean?" Jennifer snapped. I pulled out my phone again and opened my banking app. "It means I can cancel every automatic transfer, every account subsidy, and every financial arrangement I've made on your behalf. Tonight, right now, while everyone watches." Robert's face went from pale to gray. "Mom, please." "Oh, I'm not finished," I continued, warming to my theme. "I can also call the mortgage company on Monday and explain that the co-signer wants to review the terms of her guarantee. I wonder how they'll feel about your payment history once my backing is removed." Jennifer was shaking now, finally understanding the precarious foundation their entire lifestyle was built on. "And then there's the country club membership. I imagine the board would be very interested to learn about tonight's behavior, especially since the membership agreement includes clauses about conduct reflecting on the club's reputation." "You wouldn't," Jennifer whispered. "Wouldn't I?" I asked mildly. "You just publicly called me a manipulative old woman and demanded that my son choose between his wife and his mother at my granddaughter's wedding, which I paid for, at a venue I own." The crowd was watching this unfold with the fascination of people witnessing a master class in controlled destruction. "But wait," I said, as if I'd just remembered something delightful. "There's more." I scrolled through my phone contacts and found another number. "Jennifer, you remember Dr. Harrison, don't you? Robert's business partner?" Her face went even whiter, if that was possible. "Funny story about that partnership. When Robert wanted to expand the practice but couldn't qualify for the business loan, Dr. Harrison wasn't comfortable taking on all the financial risk himself. So I provided the collateral, after my lottery win, of course." I let that sink in for a moment. If I were to call Dr. Harrison right now and explain that I need to reassess my investment in the practice due to family issues, well, partnerships can be so fragile, can't they? Robert looked like he was about to be sick. Mom, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm absolutely serious. Your wife seems to think I'm a powerless old woman she can abuse publicly without consequences. I'm simply clarifying the actual power dynamics in our relationship. Emma suddenly stepped forward, her wedding dress rustling as she moved. Stop. All of you, just stop. Everyone turned to look at her, this beautiful young woman whose special day had been destroyed by adult petty politics. Mom, Emma said, looking directly at Jennifer, apologize to Grandma, right now. Emma, sweetheart, you don't understand, Jennifer started. I understand perfectly, Emma interrupted, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. I understand that Grandma paid for my education, helped with your house, supported Dad's business, and paid for this wedding. I understand that you just publicly humiliated the woman who's been supporting our family for years. And I understand that if you don't apologize right now, you're going to destroy what's left of this family. Jennifer looked around the room desperately, searching for an ally, but finding only faces filled with disapproval and disgust. And if you think, Emma continued, that I'm going to let you use me and my future children as weapons against Grandma, you're insane. She's been nothing but loving and generous, and you've been treating her like garbage. That's when Robert finally found his spine. Jennifer, he said quietly, apologize to my mother. Now. The word now carried the weight of 2 years of suppressed frustration and mounting realization of what his wife had really been doing to his family. But Jennifer had one more card to play, and she was desperate enough to use it. Fine, she said, her voice cold as winter. But before I apologize for anything, I think everyone should know the whole truth about your precious Margaret. The threat in Jennifer's voice was unmistakable, and I felt a chill of apprehension. After 7 years of estrangement, she didn't know much about my recent life, but she might know things about my past that could be damaging if twisted the right way. What truth would that be, Jennifer? I asked calmly, though my heart was racing. She smiled, and it was the ugliest expression I'd ever seen on a human face. The truth about why you really do all this financial manipulation. It's not generosity, Margaret. It's control. You're a lonely old woman who buys people's affection because you know they don't actually want you around. The words hit like physical blows because they contained just enough truth to sting. I did sometimes wonder if my help was appreciated or simply tolerated. You want to know what Robert really says about you when you're not around? Jennifer continued, emboldened by my silence. He calls you the guilt machine, always showing up with solutions to problems nobody asked you to solve, always making everyone feel obligated to include you in things. Robert's face was frozen in horror. Jennifer, don't. No, I think it's time for some honesty, she pressed on. Tell her, Robert. Tell her about Christmas dinner when you said you wished she'd just let you handle your own problems for once instead of swooping in with her checkbook. Each word was calculated to wound, and I won't lie, they were hitting their marks. But something interesting was happening in the crowd around us. Instead of nodding in agreement, people were looking increasingly disgusted with Jennifer's cruelty. Tell her about how you said her constant financial help makes you feel like a failure as a provider, Jennifer continued relentlessly. Tell her how you said she uses money to make everyone dance to her tune. Robert was shaking his head frantically. Those weren't, you're taking things out of context. Am I? Jennifer laughed bitterly. Or am I finally saying what everyone's been thinking for years? That Margaret Anderson is a lonely old woman who can't stand not being the center of attention? That's when something unexpected happened. Harold Peterson, my attorney, spoke up from the crowd. He'd apparently arrived during the drama and had been quietly listening. Mrs. Jennifer Anderson, he said clearly, I think you should stop talking now. Jennifer whirled around to face him. Excuse me? As Mrs. Anderson's legal counsel, I'm advising you that your current statements could be construed as defamatory, and they're being made in front of numerous witnesses. I'm just telling the truth, Jennifer protested. Actually, Harold continued, you're making claims about Mrs. Anderson's motivations that you have no way of substantiating. More importantly, you're doing so in a manner designed to cause emotional distress and damage her reputation. She's my mother-in-law. I have the right to— You have the right to remain silent, Harold interrupted smoothly, which I would strongly recommend you exercise immediately. But Jennifer was beyond rational thinking now. 7 years of resentment and frustration were pouring out in a toxic flood. "You want to know the real truth?" she screamed. "The truth is that Margaret has been playing puppet master with our lives since the day she won that lottery. Every gift, every payment, every generous gesture comes with strings attached. She's been buying our compliance for years." "That's enough!" Emma's voice cut through her mother's tirade like a knife. "Mom, you need to stop this right now." But Jennifer was in full meltdown mode. "No, Emma, you need to hear this. Your grandmother isn't the saint you think she is. She's a controlling, manipulative woman who—" "Who what?" Emma interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. "Who paid for my education so I wouldn't graduate with debt? Who made sure Dad's business succeeded so we'd have financial security? Who's been quietly taking care of our family for years while asking for nothing in return except basic respect?" Jennifer's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You know what I think?" Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. "I think you're angry because Grandma's generosity makes your selfishness look even worse by comparison. I think you've been taking advantage of her kindness for years, and now you're embarrassed that everyone can see it." "That's not—" Jennifer started. "It is exactly that," Robert said quietly, finally speaking up. "Emma's right. Mom, I owe you an apology. A huge one." He turned to face me directly. "I never said those things," Jennifer claimed. At least, not the way she presented them. "Yes, I sometimes felt uncomfortable accepting your help, but not because I didn't appreciate it, because I felt like I should be able to provide for my family without my mother's assistance." He took a shaky breath. "And yes, there were times when I wished I could give you things instead of the other way around. But that was about my pride, not about your motivations." Jennifer was staring at her husband like he'd grown a second head. "Robert, what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth," he replied. "Something you seem to have forgotten how to do." That's when I noticed something that made my heart stop. Emma's new husband was recording everything on his phone, and based on the number of other devices I could see pointed in our direction, this entire confrontation was being documented by multiple people. In about 12 hours, Jennifer's meltdown was going to be viral. But first, she had one more grenade to throw. The crowd had grown uncomfortably large now, with people from other events in the building drifting over to see what the commotion was about. The jazz quartet had given up all pretense of playing background music and was openly watching the drama unfold. Jennifer stood in the center of it all. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her carefully styled hair now disheveled from running her hands through it in frustration. She looked like a woman who'd lost everything and was determined to take everyone down with her. "Fine!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation. "You want the truth? The real truth? Margaret, your precious son has been lying to you for months." Emma moved closer to her new husband, who immediately put a protective arm around her. Whatever was coming, they both sensed it was going to be bad. "What are you talking about, Jennifer?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I didn't want to know. "I'm talking about the phone calls," she said, her eyes wild with malicious glee. "The secret meetings. The lies about where he's been spending his evenings." Robert's face went completely white. "Jennifer, what are you doing?" "I'm telling your mother that her precious son has been having an affair," she screamed, loud enough to be heard in the parking lot. The gasp from the crowd was audible. Emma made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach, and her new husband looked like he was ready to physically remove Jennifer from the premises. "That's not true," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Jennifer spun to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Then explain the late nights at the office with Sarah. Explain the phone calls you take in the garage. Explain the receipts I found for dinners at restaurants we've never been to together." The accusations hung in the air like poisonous smoke. I could see guests pulling out their phones, probably texting friends about the scandal they were witnessing. "Jennifer," Robert said quietly, "you don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been living with this for months, Robert, pretending I didn't notice. Pretending I didn't care, but I'm done pretending." That's when Dr. Harrison stepped forward from the crowd. I hadn't noticed him arrive, but he'd apparently been watching this disaster unfold from the sidelines. "Actually, Robert," he said clearly, "I think I can clarify this situation." All eyes turned to him, and I could see Jennifer's triumphant expression begin to waver. "Mrs. Anderson," Dr. Harrison said, addressing Jennifer directly. You're absolutely right about Robert meeting with Sarah. They have been having secret conversations and making plans behind your back. Jennifer's face lit up with vindication, but Dr. Harrison wasn't finished. However, those meetings weren't about an affair. They were about planning a surprise party for your 10th wedding anniversary next month. Sarah was helping Robert coordinate with the travel agent because her sister works for the company you used for your honeymoon. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. A surprise party? Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Robert wanted to recreate your honeymoon trip to Italy, Dr. Harrison continued gently. Sarah was helping him coordinate with the travel agent and the hotel where you stayed. The late nights at the office were him working extra hours to afford the trip without asking his mother for help again. Robert was staring at his wife with a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief. Jennifer, how could you think I would cheat on you? How could you think I would do that to our family? Jennifer stammered, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she'd just done. The dinners at restaurants? Robert continued, his voice breaking. Those were meetings with the travel agent and the hotel coordinator. I was trying to surprise you with the most romantic anniversary you'd ever had. Emma was crying again, but now it seemed to be from grief rather than anger. Mom, how could you destroy everything like this? I didn't mean... Jennifer started, but the words died in her throat as she looked around at the faces surrounding her. Disgust, pity, and disappointment reflected back at her from every direction. That's when I realized something that changed everything. Jennifer wasn't evil. She was deeply, profoundly broken. Years of feeling inadequate had twisted her perception until she saw threats everywhere and kindness nowhere. But understanding her pain didn't excuse the damage she'd just done to my family. Jennifer, I said quietly, I think you need to get some help. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. What? Professional help, therapy, counseling, something to deal with whatever has been making you so unhappy that you'd destroy your own family rather than accept kindness from someone who loves you. The ballroom had grown quiet, except for the soft sound of Jennifer's sobbing. Guests were starting to drift away, probably heading home to call their friends and family about the most dramatic wedding reception they'd ever witnessed. Emma stood in the center of it all, still beautiful in her grandmother's lace dress, but with tears in her eyes that had nothing to do with joy. Her wedding day had been ruined by her mother's paranoia and cruelty, and everyone knew it. I'm sorry, Jennifer whispered, finally looking at me directly. I'm sorry for tonight. I'm sorry for the past 7 years, and I'm sorry for being too proud and insecure to see what you were trying to do for our family. I accept your apology, I replied. But Jennifer, sorry isn't enough. You need to do the work to figure out why you've been so unhappy and why you chose to take it out on people who care about you. She nodded, tears starting again. I will. I promise I will. Robert approached his wife carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Jennifer, we need to talk, seriously, about everything. About us, about our marriage, about getting help. I know, she said quietly. I know I messed up. I know I've been difficult. I just felt like everyone was moving on without me, like I didn't matter to anyone anymore. That's when Emma surprised everyone by walking over and hugging her mother. Mom, she said softly, you matter to me. You matter to Dad. You even matter to Grandma, even after everything you've put her through. But you have to stop pushing away everyone who tries to love you. I watched this moment of reconciliation with mixed feelings. Part of me was proud of Emma for showing grace under pressure. Part of me was concerned that Jennifer would interpret forgiveness as permission to continue her behavior. But then Emma turned to address the remaining guests. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom, I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate my marriage to David. This evening hasn't gone exactly as planned, but it's taught me something important about family. She looked at me with such love and gratitude that my heart swelled. Family isn't about who pays for what or who owes whom. It's about who shows up for each other, especially when things get difficult. And my grandmother has been showing up for our family for years, even when we didn't deserve it. The remaining guests began to applaud, and I felt tears prick my eyes. So while tonight has been educational, Emma continued with a slight smile, I want everyone to know that I couldn't be happier to be married to David, and I couldn't be more grateful to have a grandmother who taught me what real love looks like. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Jennifer approached me one more time. "Margaret," she said softly, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it, but I want you to know that I'm going to get help. Real help, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make things right with this family." "That's a start," I replied. "But Jennifer, actions matter more than words. Show us. Don't tell us." She nodded and walked away to find Robert, who was standing by the windows looking out at the garden. Emma and David came over to say goodbye, and Emma hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for everything, for the wedding, for college, for never giving up on our family even when we gave up on you." "Thank you for being brave enough to invite me," I replied, "and for standing up for what's right, even when it was hard." As I drove home that night, I reflected on what had happened. 7 years of family dysfunction had exploded in the most public way possible, but maybe that's what was needed. Maybe some wounds have to be opened before they can properly heal. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Thank you for making my wedding unforgettable. Not for the drama, but for showing me what it looks like when someone stands up for themselves with grace and strength. I love you, Grandma." I smiled as I pulled into my driveway. The little house on Maple Street had never looked more welcoming. Tomorrow, I'd call Harold about setting up a college scholarship fund in Emma's name. Next week, I'd look into family therapy resources for Robert and Jennifer. But tonight, I was going to sit on my porch with a cup of tea and enjoy the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be treated poorly. After all, at 68 years old, I'd finally learned that respect isn't something you can buy with kindness or money. It's something you have to demand for yourself, and demand it I had. The lottery had given me financial freedom, but tonight had given me something even more valuable, the knowledge that I didn't have to accept mistreatment from anyone, family included. Some might call what happened tonight dramatic or over the top. I prefer to think of it as educational. Jennifer learned that actions have consequences. Robert learned that enabling bad behavior helps no one. And Emma learned that standing up for what's right is always worth doing, even when it's difficult. As for me, I learned that sometimes the most generous thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst impulses. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Love means caring enough to demand better. And that, I thought as I sipped my tea under the stars, was a lesson worth $53 million. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.